Hey everybody, it's Dalton. I want to do the second part of that first video I did, which was, the best way to, or really the number one way of catching bass. It's always been plastic worms. I did color selection on the last video, and then now I want to talk about rigging. I'm not going to get real in depth about any of these individual baits because I am going to be doing individual videos on them as I use them more and more. Some of them I already have on video. But I want to introduce you to 11 ways that I use or rig plastic worms. Let's get started. The first one is going to be a simple Texas rig. Using an extra wide gap hook, you can Texas rig any worm you want to. A Texas rig is a very effective technique for cover. You can you can do this without a weight. If you're using a Senko, you can throw this weightless in shallow water. If you are in deeper water, you can put a bullet weight up here. It'll take that bait down. But this Texas rig worms, I've been using them since I was a kid. Another way to rig is a Carolina rig. Now a Carolina rig, what I do is I usually will take these little egg sinkers, and if I'm fishing deeper water, I'll use heavier line, and I will just simply take whatever plastic I'm using, a worm or whatever, and you just drag it on the bottom. So what happens is you set up a leader, however long you want the leader to be, with a little swivel. You tie your weight up, or you put your weight up here and tie your line on, and all you're doing is dragging this, okay? You can do it with heavy weight, you can do it with light weight, you can use a bait caster, a spinning rod, you can use a kind of a power Carolina rig or a finesse Carolina rig. I'll be doing more on this later on, but this is a great way to catch fish. Another one is the video I did on the Whiz Gidget. It's that nail-weighted Texas rig worm. Go back and look at that video if you haven't. I go step by step. My wife was catching them on this yesterday. Another one that you would use a nail or a nail weight for your worm is a really popular technique called a Nico rig. I generally will take a soft stick bait like this, a Senko or a Yum Dinger. Again, you put a nail in here, you can put a little O-ring, and you take maybe a size 1 Dropshot hook by Trocar, and what you're doing is you're simply bouncing this on the bottom, and you can see the tail action, and it just catches a lot of bass. It's called a Nico rig. Another one is called a Wacky Rig, where you just take a hook, put it right in the middle of a soft stick bait or whatever bait you want to use. It's a Wacky Rig. If you're in shallow water, throw it without any weight at all. If you're in deeper water, you can take a little jig head. They make them for it. And then it's called a flick shake, okay? And it pulls this bait down and it oscillates as it goes down. And a lot of times, as soon as it hits the bottom, that's when the bass take it. I use the weight when I'm in deeper water. So also, the Ned Rig, right? The Ned Rig is just a small worm. Yesterday when I was at the lake, it's amazing to me how, when you have the hook here and the tail here, the bass managed to find a way to not get hooked. And they were just pulling at the tail, which is telling me they didn't really want this. So again, versatility, right? I took the same deal and I put a little Strike King Rage Swimmer on there at 2.75. That's the size of it. It's a little swim bait, and I simply used it like a Ned Rig and walked it along the bottom, and I started catching them with this. Get in the boat. And they seem to. I guess he wants to stay in the boat. I got him on a little swim bait. Just barely moving it along, right in that shade. Another good technique is what is called a floating worm. Now, Zoom makes a worm called a trick worm, okay? And they come in all kinds of colors. And sometimes when I'm using this worm, I will break away from some of my colors and I'll use these wild colors like pink. And the one that really is funny to me, and I don't even know why a bass takes it, is merthiolate. I don't know what in the water looks like this, but my theory is it makes them mad. They also have the bigger ones. If you have big largemouth bass, I would go with the big mag trick worm by Zoom. And I don't use an extra wide gap hook. I use a offset, and the way you rig this thing is you want it to look like this. And when it looks like that, it has a better action in the water. And all you do, you use it like a jerk bait. You just take it and twitch your slack. It erratically moves around. I particularly like to use this in shallow water and grass. That's really my favorite way. Again, we'll get more in depth later. Shaky Head. Shaky Head's a great way to catch bass. It's one of my favorites. I take a little Shaky Head jig. It's got a little screw lock on it. You don't have to use the screw lock. I just like them. I'll take that little jig, put a little worm on there, set it up almost like the floating worm, but then I just work it along the bottom, shaking it. Shaking that slack, Shaky Head. It really gives an erratic action to that worm. One of the worms that's kind of lost traction, a lot of people don't use it, is a swimming worm. You've heard of swim baits, where you take a little bait that looks like a little swim bait or a little bait and you swim it along. You can do the same thing with a plastic worm. These are made by Zoom. Yum makes them. They're little cut tail worms. And you can take these and swim them along the bottom. I like to swim them along the bottom. I like to swim them through grass. If I'm fishing in grass, I Texas rig this. I put a bullet weight, a bullet weight in front of it, and I will literally swim this worm through grass. Swimming worms work really good. Another thing, and I'll do more videos on this, are jigs. Jigs work really good, just straight jigs, okay? This is a Booyah structure jig. And what it's designed to do, at least the way I use it, is if I know there's a lake that has a lot of crawdads, I'm going to use a jig. But a lot of the jig trailers would be like crawdad imitators or creature baits. I like using worms. I'll just take any type of a curly tail worm. I'll use that as my trailer, and when I'm dragging this thing on the bottom, this little curly tail worm does a lot of action. So you can take worms and attach them to your jigs and catch bass with them. And then the last one, or number 11, is going to be simply the Dropshot. The Dropshot catches bass. You can use any worm you want. You can use longer worms like these. You can use short worms. You can use just about anything you want. And a Dropshot is an effective way of catching bass. You can also take your Wacky Rig, okay, and you can set it up Wacky Rig on a Dropshot. So these are 11 ways that I rig worms. There's a lot more ways, by the way, but these are 11 ways that I've caught a lot of fish. I have a lot of confidence. Just want to share this with you. I hope it helps. Worms are the #1 way to catch bass. If you have nothing else but plastic worms, you're going to catch bass. Just learn how to retrieve them, learn how to work them. It's going to happen. I appreciate you watching the video. Have a great day. Talk to you soon.